Oakcrest was a community where conformity was the unwritten law. Every lawn was manicured to near perfection, every mailbox stood straight and tidy, and the freshly painted homes wore an identical shade of beige. The Homeowners Association ruled, with an iron fist behind polite smiles, sending notices for the slightest infraction. A crooked flower pot, a lawn too long, even an unapproved flag. Caleb Rourke knew all this the day he moved in. A retired Master Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps, he had survived more dangerous places than this suburban cul-de-sac, but he wasn't ready to be silenced here. The uniform he carried was not just fabric stitched together, it was a symbol of battles fought, brothers lost, and sacrifices made. It was history etched in every thread, every metal sewn deep within the lining. On the first morning after settling in, Caleb carefully hung his dress blues in a glass shadow box on the porch wall beside the front door. The Marine Corps emblem gleamed in the sunlight, and the rows of ribbons told stories of courage and valor. His neighbors might have seen it as just another piece of decor, but for Caleb, it was a sacred reminder of his identity. The first few days passed quietly. People nodded politely during morning walks, whispered about the newcomer, but no one said much. Caleb was used to quiet respect rather than loud applause. Yet beneath the calm surface, he sensed a tension brewing. Flyers had appeared around the neighborhood, warning residents about visual clutter and community standards. Caleb ignored them. His uniform was not clutter, it was honor. Then the note came. It was thin, unsigned, and slipped under. His door one cold morning. Remove the uniform display immediately. This is a private community, and such displays are disruptive. Caleb held the note in his hand, feeling the rough paper crinkle. He recognized the tone. Polite but absolute, the same tone used to issue orders in the military. But this was different. This was a command to erase a lifetime of service. He went to the next HOA meeting, his uniform's shadow box under one arm. The room was packed, the air thick with murmurs. The HOA board members sat in their elevated chairs like judges, faces bland but eyes sharp. Caleb spoke steadily, recounting his years of service, the importance of remembering sacrifice and why. The uniform had to stay. One board member, a woman with tightly pulled hair and cold eyes, interrupted. "Mr. Rourke, we respect your service, but our rules are clear. Personal displays cannot remain visible to the community." Another man nodded. "The ordinance is for everyone's benefit. No exceptions." Caleb's fists clenched, but he kept his voice calm. "This isn't just a display. It's a symbol of duty and sacrifice. To remove it is to dishonor every Marine who ever wore that uniform." The meeting ended with no decision, only promises to review the matter. Caleb felt the weight of unseen eyes watching him. On his walk home, he noticed a neighbor glance away quickly, and across the street a small group whispered behind. Closed curtains. That night Caleb lay awake, the glow from the street lamp casting shadows across his living room. He stared at the uniform's shadow box, illuminated by the soft porch light. Somewhere out there, someone wanted it gone. But why? In the days that followed, strange things happened. The mailbox was smeared with red paint. Tire tracks appeared in his freshly cut lawn, but no vehicles were found. And then, one morning, Caleb found a new, cryptic note pinned to his door. "You've been warned. Remove it, or we will." The words chilled him. This was no longer just an HOA dispute. It was a battle brewing in the quiet streets of Oakcrest, and Caleb was its unexpected warrior. He touched the glass shadow box gently, feeling the weight of history in his fingertips. The fight had only just begun. The morning sun had barely risen when Caleb stepped outside to start his usual routine. He liked the quiet before the world fully woke. Coffee in hand, the crisp air biting gently at his face. But something was off today. As his eyes swept across the porch, his heart dropped. The shadow box was gone. Where the glass frame had proudly displayed his Marine Corps dress blues, now only a bare spot remained on the wall, the screws still embedded in the wood. The faint scent of smoke lingered, sharp and acrid in the cool morning air. Caleb's hand hovered near the empty space. He could almost see the ribbons, the medals, the countless memories. Then his gaze fell to the welcome mat. There, faint but unmistakable, was a smudge of ash, a dark smear on the otherwise pristine surface. His mind raced. Someone had taken it. But how? The front gate was locked, his home alarm was armed, no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no footprints. It was as if the display had vanished into thin air. Later that day, Caleb met with a local veteran friend, Lisa, at the neighborhood coffee shop. He showed her the spot, the ash stain, the eerie emptiness on his porch. They burned it, Lisa said quietly. I'm sorry, Caleb. That's not just theft. That's a message. Caleb clenched his jaw. The uniform wasn't just clothing. It was a symbol of every hardship, every battle, every fallen comrade. And now, it was ashes. That night, restless and driven by a mix of anger and confusion, Caleb decided to check the security footage from his home cameras. He rewound the hours from the night before, scanning every movement. Then he saw it. Two shadowy figures approaching his house just after midnight. They moved quickly and deliberately, carrying something wrapped in a dark tarp. Without breaking a sweat, they slipped past the side gate and straight to the porch. Caleb's breath caught as they lifted the shadow box from the wall, gently but with clear purpose. Then, something even more chilling, they carried the uniform away. He fast-forwarded. The footage cut off suddenly just before 1 a.m. Caleb's phone buzzed. A message, no sender. A photo of burning fabric in a fire pit, the glow flickering orange against the night. He stared at the screen, the firelight revealing torn ribbons melting into ashes. Someone had set his uniform ablaze. The next morning, Caleb went to the HOA office, demanding answers. The receptionist offered no comment. The HOA president was unavailable. Caleb left a terse message, vowing he would not let this go. Walking back to his home, Caleb felt eyes on him. Neighbors who once gave a nod or smile now crossed the street to avoid him. One elderly woman whispered, "You should be careful. This isn't just about rules anymore." That evening, Caleb found a neighbor waiting by the mailbox. A young man named Marcus who kept mostly to himself. "I don't know who's behind this," Marcus said softly. "But the HOA's got a darker side. They don't want anyone stirring. Things up." Caleb looked at Marcus, sensing there was more to say. But before he could ask, a sudden noise from down the street caught their attention. Loud voices, a scuffle, then a sharp, terrified scream. Instinctively, Caleb and Marcus ran toward the noise. Around the corner, they found an overturned trash bin and a terrified elderly man gasping on the sidewalk. "They're coming for anyone who speaks out," he rasped. The community Caleb thought he knew was unraveling, layer by dark layer. What had started as a simple fight over a uniform had morphed into something far more sinister. Back at his house, Caleb lit a candle and sat staring at the blank wall where his uniform had hung. His hand rested on a folded American flag he kept inside, his last connection to what was lost. He whispered to himself, "This ends one way or another." And somewhere beyond the fence line, the quiet hum of power shifted, like a storm gathering in the distance. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across Oak Crest's pristine lawns. Caleb's mind was racing with questions he couldn't yet answer. Who had taken his uniform, and why? The small ash stain on his porch had ignited a fire inside, him that refused to die. That evening, fueled by frustration and a gnawing need for answers, Caleb made a decision. He wasn't just going to wait for the HOA to respond. If the uniform had been burned, then maybe he could find the ashes and find out who was behind it. He slipped quietly out of his house under the cover of twilight, his boots muffled by the thick grass. The clubhouse, usually a symbol of community, gatherings and polite meetings now felt like the heart of a secret war. Peering through the bushes, Caleb spotted the fire pit behind the clubhouse. The remnants of burnt fabric still smoldered faintly, and the air was thick with the bitter smell of smoke. His eyes narrowed. He bent down and picked up a small piece of charred cloth, brushing off the dirt. His fingers trembled as he examined it, unmistakable threads from his uniform. As he straightened, he caught sight of something on the clubhouse wall, a framed notice, freshly hung, with cold, bureaucratic words. Compliance upheld. Patriotism is not exemption. All residents must adhere to community standards. Caleb's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about rules. It was a message of power and control. Just then, a shadow shifted near the clubhouse entrance. Caleb crouched low, heart pounding. Through a narrow window, he saw a group of HOA board members gathered around a table. They spoke in hushed voices, their faces unreadable but tense. One woman, the board president with her signature tight bun, slammed her fist on the table. "We can't let this escalate," she hissed. "If Rourke gets any more support, this place will be swarmed by protesters." Another man leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "We've already removed the uniform. That's enough for the community to understand our authority." Caleb's jaw clenched. They spoke like generals planning a battle, not neighbors discussing lawn care. Suddenly, the clubhouse door opened, and a third board member stepped out into the fading light. Caleb recognized him from the neighborhood, a man named Wallace, always polite but with eyes that never quite met yours. Wallace looked directly at Caleb's hiding spot, a faint smirk playing on his lips before he disappeared into the darkness. The tension in Caleb's chest twisted tighter. He knew Wallace's type, the kind of man who hides scars beneath a smile, who follows orders without question. As Caleb slipped back toward his house, the quiet hum of the neighborhood felt charged. With unseen eyes, he wondered just how deep this conspiracy went, and if anyone in Oak Crest was truly on his side. The next morning brought a surprise. A neighbor, Mrs. Nguyen, an elderly woman who usually kept to herself, knocked on Caleb's door. In her hands was a faded, folded piece of paper. "I think you should have this," she said softly, avoiding his eyes. Caleb unfolded the paper carefully. It was a black-and-white photocopy of a letter, dated nearly 10 years ago, from a local veterans group to the HOA board. The letter warned that attempts to restrict military displays could lead to legal consequences. At the bottom, someone had scrawled in red ink, "Ignored. Repeat offenders will be punished." Mrs. Nguyen hesitated before leaving, her voice barely above a whisper. "This community, it has secrets. Some better left buried." Caleb's mind spun. If the HOA had ignored legal warnings before, how far would they go this time? And what did punished mean in this context? As dusk fell again, Caleb stood in his empty porch, staring at the blank wall where his uniform once hung. The air felt thick with unseen danger. He was no stranger to threats. But here, in Oak Crest, the fight was different. It wasn't bullets or bombs. It was silence, fear, and control. Caleb clenched his fists, whispering to the wind, "They've lit the fire. Now they'll see what burns." The morning sun barely pierced through the thick fog that rolled over Oak Crest, casting a pale gray light on the quiet neighborhood. Caleb still felt the weight of the photocopied letter in his pocket, but it wasn't the only thing troubling him. He needed to understand who exactly was orchestrating this quiet war against him. He walked to the corner coffee shop, hoping for a break in the growing storm. There he found his neighbor Marcus already waiting. The young man looked uneasy, glancing around as if afraid the walls had ears. Marcus, Caleb began cautiously, I need to know. What's really going on with the HOA? This isn't just about rules, is it? Marcus swallowed hard. No, it's not. You're not the first to have this happen. Remember Mrs. Thompson, the Gold Star widow? She put up a small memorial in her yard for her son, a fallen soldier. The HOA made her take it down. When she resisted, she was forced to sell her house. Left the neighborhood, broken. Caleb's heart tightened. Why? Who are they protecting? Marcus hesitated, then lowered his voice. There's one board. Member Wallace. People say he's more than just HOA. He's got a past. Not a good one. Like what? Marcus looked around nervously before pulling out his phone. He showed Caleb a blacked-out court record from years ago. The name was different, but the face was unmistakable. Wallace was a former military officer, dishonorably discharged after a scandal involving classified documents and a cover-up. The case was sealed, details buried deep. Some say he's using the HOA to control Oakcrest like a private army. If anyone stirs up trouble, they disappear, Marcus whispered. Caleb's eyes narrowed. The man orchestrating his harassment was hiding a dark past, using the community as a shield. That night, Caleb sat on his porch, the air heavy with impending storm clouds. The wind picked up, rattling the empty hooks where his shadow box had hung. He thought about Wallace, how a dishonorable past could drive a man to such lengths of cruelty. Then, an unexpected knock shattered the quiet. Caleb opened the door to find Lisa, the veteran friend from before. Her face was grave. I found something, she said. There's more to Wallace's story. Before he was dishonorably discharged, he was involved in a classified mission that went horribly wrong. Secrets that certain people want buried forever. He's desperate to keep his past hidden. Caleb's pulse quickened. You think this uniform thing is personal? Lisa nodded. More than that, you're poking at something dark, Caleb. Be careful. The next day, Caleb decided to confront the truth. He went to the local library and dug through old newspaper archives. He found articles about Wallace's military career, the scandal, the abrupt discharge, but also something else, a shadowy connection between Wallace and a powerful defense contractor with interests in the Oak Crest area. The contractor had donated heavily to the HOA's legal fund. Caleb realized this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a cover-up. Later, as he walked back home, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. Stop digging, or you'll be next. A chill ran down his spine. That night, as thunder rolled overhead and rain battered the windows, Caleb sat with his hand resting on the folded American flag inside. The fight was no longer just about a uniform, it was about exposing a dangerous secret buried beneath Oakcrest's polished surface, and Wallace was watching, waiting. The story that Caleb never wanted to tell was suddenly everywhere. After days of digging and anonymous threats, he decided to make the uniform's disappearance public. He contacted a military journalist known for uncovering veterans' stories, Sarah Dawson. Within hours, Sarah's article exploded online. Headlines blared, HOA burns Marine veterans' uniform, the Corps demands answers. Social media ignited, veterans across the nation sharing the story, rallying behind Caleb's fight. The small neighborhood of Oak Crest was no longer just a quiet suburb. It was the epicenter of a brewing battle for respect and justice. Within 24 hours, a formal statement came from the Marine Corps headquarters. The statement condemned the destruction of the uniform as an affront to the values and sacrifices of all Marines, and promised full support for Master Sergeant Rourke and a thorough investigation. Caleb was stunned. The Corps was mobilizing, and the stakes just got much higher. The following morning, a group of Marines arrived at Caleb's home. Sharp uniforms, disciplined posture, eyes fierce with purpose. They stood silently on his porch, saluting the empty shadow box, a powerful symbol in itself. Their presence was both a shield and a warning. Caleb watched as news crews flocked to the scene. Protesters gathered outside the Oak Crest gates, chanting and holding signs demanding justice for Caleb and all veterans disrespected by the HOA's actions. Inside the clubhouse, the HOA board was in chaos. The president paced nervously, phone glued to her ear, trying to contain the fallout. Wallace's usual cold smile was gone, replaced by a flicker of fear. The community was split. Some neighbors supported Caleb openly, while others whispered of backlash and keeping the peace. But the tide was turning. One evening, as Caleb walked his dog near the clubhouse, Marcus caught up with him. "They're planning something," Marcus said, voice low. "The HOA isn't going down without a fight. I heard they hired private security, people who don't care about laws." Caleb nodded. "They want to intimidate us." Suddenly, headlights flashed behind them. A black SUV slowed, then sped away. Caleb's heart raced. This wasn't random. He was being watched. That night, Caleb received a call from an unexpected ally, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, a senior officer from the Marine Corps Legal Division. "We're preparing to take legal action against the HOA," Harris said. "Their actions violate federal protections for veterans. We're going all the way." Caleb felt a surge of hope and resolve. The uniform's ashes were no longer just a symbol of loss. They were a rallying cry. But the danger was real. Caleb's phone buzzed again, a message. "Stop now, or face the consequences." Ignoring the threats, Caleb prepared for the fight ahead. The Marines who stood beside him were not just soldiers. They were brothers and sisters in arms, ready to defend what was right. The battle lines were drawn. Oak Crest was no longer a quiet neighborhood. It was a battlefield for honor, truth, and justice, and Caleb was ready to lead the charge. The presence of the Marines had emboldened Caleb, but it also stirred a hornet's nest. The once quiet cul-de-sac buzzed with whispers of resistance and defiance. Caleb felt the pressure mounting every day, like a storm tightening its grip. One humid night, just as the clock struck midnight, Caleb was jolted awake by the sound of crunching gravel outside. His window. He grabbed his flashlight and quietly crept toward the living room. Through the curtains, he saw several shadowy figures moving swiftly around his porch. They wore dark clothing and masks, armed with tools designed to break and enter. The unmistakable glint of flashlights danced in the night. Caleb's heart pounded. This wasn't a random break-in. It was a raid, an attempt to intimidate or silence him. Without thinking, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline in the chaos. Minutes stretched like hours. The figures moved with practiced efficiency, smashing the lock on his gate and trying to pry open his front door. Caleb felt helpless, but determined. Then the sound of sirens pierced the night air. Headlights flooded the street as police cruisers screeched to a halt. The masked intruders scattered into the darkness, disappearing like ghosts. Caleb stood on his porch, shaking but alive, as officers secured the perimeter and took his statement. The next day, news of the attempted break-in spread like wildfire. Some neighbors expressed sympathy, others whispered about escalating tensions and playing with fire. Caleb's sense of isolation grew, but so did his resolve. The Marine Corps legal team stepped up their efforts, filing emergency injunctions to protect Caleb and investigate the HOA's involvement. Lieutenant Colonel Harris warned Caleb to stay vigilant. The battle was far from over. Meanwhile, Caleb's investigation uncovered more unsettling facts. Wallace had been quietly funneling HOA funds into a private security firm known for aggressive tactics and intimidation. The same firm rumored to be responsible for the raid. Caleb realized the HOA had crossed a dangerous line. What began as petty disputes over decorations had evolved into a coordinated campaign of fear and control. Determined not to be broken, Caleb reached out to veterans organizations and local media, sharing his story and exposing the HOA's tactics. Support poured in from all corners. Protests grew, petitions circulated, and pressure mounted on the HOA board. But behind the scenes, Caleb felt eyes watching him constantly. His mail was tampered with, his phone occasionally glitched with static and untraceable calls. The threat was no longer just from the HOA, it was a shadow network with deep roots and far-reaching reach. One evening, Lisa met Caleb at his home, her expression grave. "They're escalating," she warned. "This isn't just about you anymore, it's about keeping power at any cost." Caleb nodded. He was ready for the fight. But questions gnawed at him. How far would they go? Who else was involved? And could justice truly prevail in a place built on silence? As Caleb stared into the night, the flickering porch light illuminated a new determination in his eyes. No matter the cost, he would not let his uniform and what it stood for be erased. The following week, the tension in Oak Crest was almost palpable. Caleb's fight had become a beacon for veterans and supporters nationwide, but it also drew darker attention. Every knock at his door made his heart race. Every stranger in the street felt like a threat. Late one afternoon, as Caleb sifted through the mounting pile of documents from the Marine Corps legal team, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. A distorted voice whispered, "You don't know the half of it, Rourke. Wallace isn't acting alone." Before Caleb could respond, the line went dead. His mind spun. Who else was involved? And why? Determined to get answers, Caleb arranged a secret meeting with Marcus, the young neighbor who had warned him about Wallace. They met in a small, dimly lit cafe, voices low and hurried. "Wallace has powerful allies," Marcus explained. "The defense contractor you found links to, they've got political connections. They're invested in controlling this neighborhood because of a planned military tech facility nearby." Caleb's eyes widened. So the HOA's harassment was about covering up their plans? Marcus nodded grimly. Exactly. They didn't want anyone stirring up trouble, especially veterans who might resist. Caleb clenched his fists. The war had never been about a uniform. It was about power, control, and silencing those who stood in their way. Later that night, Caleb received a tip, a hidden storage locker rented under Wallace's alias. It might hold proof of the conspiracy. With Marcus and Lisa, Caleb broke into the facility under the cover of darkness. Inside, they found boxes filled with HOA meeting minutes, legal threats, and most damning, contracts linking Wallace and the defense contractor to private security forces used to intimidate residents. But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Operation Silent Guard. Inside were detailed plans outlining a campaign to suppress opposition within Oak Crest, including Caleb's name and a list of others marked as potential threats. As they digested the evidence, footsteps echoed behind them. They spun around to see Wallace, flanked by two burly men blocking the exit. Wallace's cold smile chilled them. "You're digging too deep, Rourke. This ends now." Before Caleb could react, the men advanced. A tense struggle erupted. Marcus managed to call 911 while Lisa held off one of the men. Caleb grappled with Wallace, their faces inches apart. Years of anger and betrayal burning in Caleb's eyes. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights filled the room. Police burst in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The intruders hesitated, then fled into the night. Wallace was handcuffed and read his rights. His empire of silence was unraveling. Back at Caleb's house, the neighborhood's atmosphere shifted. The community that had once turned its back now watched cautiously, some with newfound respect. The Marine Corps praised Caleb's bravery and assured the public that justice would be served. As Caleb looked at the empty shadow box, he felt a mix of relief and resolve. The battle had been fierce, but the truth was finally coming to light. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Wallace and the HOA board members began. Caleb sat front and center, flanked by Marine Corps officers and supporters who had rallied behind him. The evidence was overwhelming: secret meetings, intimidation tactics, falsified documents, and the orchestrated destruction of a Marine's uniform. The jury listened intently as the prosecution laid bare the conspiracy that had gripped Oak Crest. Wallace remained stone-faced, his confident facade cracked but unbroken. During the closing arguments, Caleb's lawyer turned to the jury. "This is not just about one man's uniform. It's about respect for those who serve, about standing up to those who abuse power in our own communities." When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty on all counts. The HOA board members were sentenced to prison time, and Wallace's fall from grace was complete. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted. Caleb's story had become a symbol of justice and resilience, inspiring veterans and civilians alike. But the victory felt bittersweet. Weeks later, Caleb returned to his home. The shadow box was replaced, this time with his uniform carefully preserved and framed, a testament to endurance. Yet, as he stood on his porch, a mysterious envelope slid under his door caught his eye. Inside was a single photograph, an old black and white image of a group of Marines, including a young Wallace, standing together in front of a classified military base. Scribbled on the back was a message: "The war never ends. Sometimes it just changes shape." Caleb's breath caught. The battle in Oak Crest was over, but the war, the real war, was far from finished. He looked up at the horizon, the setting, sun casting long shadows over the neighborhood. Justice had been served, but in the quiet corners of Oak Crest, darker forces lingered, waiting. And Caleb knew one thing for certain: he would be ready.